It's just got that absolute have a go hero vibe to it.
Hey up, I'm Guy Kestevan the Testaman, and this is my live ride review of the specialised Chisel Evo Comp. And it's a hell of a lot more bike than you might be expecting.
So standard Chisel is the alloy version of the carbon fibre Epic, which makes the Chisel Evo the alloy version of the Epic Evo, with 130mm fork up front, sticky front tyre and big brakes, which sounds a lot like a cheap and cheerful cross-country bike doing trail bike cosplay. But it's potentially the perfect, cost-effective, carbon-killing, off-piste speed freak for riders who value chaos control over comfort. But because this bike is all about the ride, not the numbers, I'm just going to stick the Geo up there in the corner and let you know just what it feels like on the trail and whether it should be on your short travel shortlist or your shit list. But as soon as you start moving it around on more sort of old school, slower speed, techie cross-country stuff, that steeper, more XC head angle and 465mm reach on this large really come into their own. And even the relatively tall BB helps with pedal clearance on more stoppy starty stuff. So although it can feel a bit perched at times with the long seat tube as well, meaning you can't fit a super long dropper, it's got a really kind of pert, responsive feel on the ground, and that's actually matched perfectly by the suspension and this alloy frame feel, despite those really skinny little stays. It's actually, and to be fair, even the main tubes are slim compared to big box section alloy or carbon. The whole bike feels really taut and bordering on too firm through these handlebars, to be honest. And again, just see there, you know, the fact that I'm not tapping out the pedals as I come up and over there, so I can still get a power stroke in. Short front end just pops up over these rocks. So where a longer bike might get caught out and hung up, this little Chisel Evo is literally in its element. That short stroke shock with the decreased travel compared to the Epic Evo, mainly because you can't quite get the same flex out of alloy stays as you can from carbon stays without risking long-term fatigue issues. But it gives a more progressive, more poppy feel at the back end, and combined with a tighter custom tune, you've just got a really responsive, snappy feel bike. Certainly for this price point, it's outstanding. And those Grid Trail carcass tyres give you a bit more peace of mind over more aggressive, rocky sections like this. I mean, they definitely contribute to that nuttier ride feel compared to a lighter weight carcass, and also, you know, they're heavier as well, but It's kind of like the equivalent of, maybe not steel toe cap boots. Actually, to be fair, with the sticky compound, it is kind of like wearing steel toe cap boots in terms of that element of safety. Even if that cuts into the speed of acceleration and sort of pedal stroke to pedal stroke responsiveness. And also just the general rolling efficiency. But then this is still very obviously an epic in the way that the suspension prioritizes that pedaling efficiency. It lifts and stiffens under chain torque because of the higher anti-squat. So you'll occasionally spit the back tyre as a result, but you get excellent feedback in terms of the power going down, bike going forward, and no sag or sogginess in that equation to be demoralising when the climbs get longer or harder. Plus, even with that taut back end, traction is still surprisingly good for a flex day bike. Probably not as good as the plushest, most neutral full linkage bikes, but all the same, easily gripped enough to keep you mostly concentrating on the pedaling, not where you put every power stroke or nurturing the rear tyre. And the seat angle, even with a longer fork, is still steep enough to keep you in a good climbing position naturally as well. So yeah, just a really positive experience on climbs and techie single track, even with big sticky front tyre on. But obviously, if this is more the sort of riding you're doing, then you've got the standard Chisel as well, with lighter, faster tyres, thinner rims, skinnier fork, all just making it that bit lighter, more rapid, and more comfortable too. And there's a full review video I actually filmed up here as well, so I got the full kind of back-to-back comparison between the two bikes. Not accidental, folks. Occasionally I do actually do planning. And to be fair, if you've watched that video, you'll know that that Chisel is as sweet as the smell of the heather we're riding through now. But as I've already said, you know, those sturdier tyres and a bit more travel, a bit more control, definitely a bit more peace of mind when you're looking at some random rockery down here that you might not always be able to avoid. But again, you know, slightly steeper, swifter steering helps you tweak and turn around stuff that a longer, more barge-like trail bike is just going to force you to plough through and over. And it is a proper top end, well, not top end because it hasn't got the gold on it, but in terms of damper, this Performance Elite has all the low and high speed rebound and compression adjustment that the factory forks does, but just at a cheaper price point. Plus, it's all black, which matches this totally stealth frame really nicely. Because it really is a look of this bike. And there's a lot of smarts in the frame as well. That smart weld tubing, unique to Specialized, where they actually close off the end of the tubes. Each tube is a 3D structure in its own right, with shaped, sort of trumpeted ends that turn in before they meet other tube, you know, at the end of the tube. So they have a lot of far more structural integrity in their own right than just an open-ended tube. If you think of Coke cans with ends on compared to, whoa, oh dear, I made a mental note to avoid that and then forgot the mental notes. Have to bring a night ride down here, that'll get them. But you know, it's got that stiffness in the tube, also means a more consistent connection between tubes and keystones like the bottom bracket and the head tube. It's not just reliant on accurate mitering. You've got a fully monocoque formed tube there. Plus, they actually form little sort of divots in the junctions that make it easier to get the weld bead in there more consistently and more smoothly, which again strengthens the whole bike up. So you can make the tube balls themselves a lot thinner and lighter and play with the ride feel more. And it's not just the alloy tube set that's really smart on this bike either. I mean, it hasn't got the SWAT internal storage of the carbon bike, because it's really hard to do that on alloy, especially with a thinner tube, without making it very heavy, because you're compromising the strength of the tubes a lot if you're not careful. But you've got twin bottle cage mounts with a 2-position on the down tube. You've got some really nice rubbery plastic armour protecting the frame tubes and the junction for the main pivot as well, so you're not going to get rocks getting in there and chewing away at your sensitive bottom bracket, shell, etc. You've got a UDH gear hanger, as you'd expect, and the linkage itself, again, really neat. It's a piece of CNC machining, so, you know, yes, it's 1,500 quid cheaper than the equivalent spec on the carbon bike, and obviously it is heavier than that carbon frame by roughly a kilo. I haven't got exact figures because I've not stripped the frames down, but according to Specialized, it's roughly a kilo. But it's still a really light frame set at 3 kilos. You know, that is genuinely lighter than a lot of carbon frames. You know, even something like a Tall Boy or a Yeti SB 120 are going to be in that ballpark for a carbon frame. And if you find its appetite for techie descending, means you're doing a lot of climbing, there's some easy ways to lose some weight off that 14 kilos. You can swap out that down-spec rear cassette and save a couple of 100 grams, which would also make the suspension more sensitive because the less unsprung mass. And the wheels are relatively heavy too. You could easily lose a couple of 100 grams and get a faster reacting free up in the process without even going to carbon. Good lightweight alloy wheel set to do the job. You know, and even things like that T9 tyre is heavier than the T7 tyre, and you've got a really big 200mm rotor on the front as well for that extra stopping power, which, to be honest, at first I thought, well, for a bike with only 110mm of travel, that seems like unnecessary overkill in both those cases. But the more I ride it and realise this doesn't feel like a beefed up cross-country bike so much as it feels like one of the great glory days sort of 4-cross bikes, like the Blur 4X. It's just got that absolute have a go hero vibe to it. And that rear suspension, though it is short on millimeters, it is remarkably capable when it comes to controlling landings and sucking up much bigger hits than you would expect. So what it lacks in comfort, it really makes up for in sort of seismic chaos control, way more than I was expecting. And that really suits the feel of this 34 fork on the front too. And shout out to the Specialized tyres too, not just for the grip levels, but also they're superbly damped, and just like the bike, they're a total bargain too. And while I've criticised some of the latest dampers from Fox for being a bit too firm and aggressive when it comes to their compression, it actually suits this Chisel really well, because that's what the back end feels like as well. You know, it's a bike that's relying on you to pop and lift to get it through the bigger stuff, but to pop and lift, it's a bike that's relying on you to pop and lift to get it through the tactical stuff and keep a sort of chunter speed up, but then it's got that real support and control to handle the bigger stuff. And that's surprisingly how the frame feels as well. Like I say, you know, this is not what I was expecting. You kind of have a bike in your head when you know the history of the frame. You've ridden the XC version, and that feels like a proper, you know, lightweight, supple XC bike. And I was expecting this not to be a bit not as convincing with the bigger fork, bigger rotors and stickier tyres. I had it in my head to recommend, you know, you move to the lighter versions and kind of went down country more on it. But this is much more rowdy trail, you know, frustrated dad country than I was imagining it to be. And the kit it's got, while I'm sure you could find better value stuff on other brands, just hangs together as a package. And I know I've got a habit of just getting overexcited about bikes and getting more and more into them the more I ride it, just because, well, riding mountain bikes is still bloody good fun. But I'm even starting to think that the weight of this bike is almost an advantage, because there are moments where that carbon Epic Evo just doesn't feel like it's sticking down properly to the trail, whereas this Chisel just seems to have more authority, more connection, just particularly the front end just tracking so much better than I expected for what is, you know, a slim alloy frame with borderline drinking straws for seats tubes. This is a bike, you know, it's really working the hips through here. Whoa! And again, that's 66.5, 66 degree head tube, whichever way you want it, just makes it a little bit easier and swifter to get the nose around, get the hips down. Even though, like I say, it's a relatively tall bike, it doesn't feel like that on the trail. And look at the speed it carries. Whoa! Lean back a bit too much there. But again, luckily, that T9 compound was there to save me. And those chunkier side knobs on that purgatory tyre just stepping in there, saving me from my overexcitement in a way that having a ground control up front, because that's on the rear, just wouldn't have done. So each time I'm trying to think, oh, maybe not that. It proves why this bike deserves a chunkier spec. And the only things that are really griping with me are the grips and bars. feel very, very firm. Yes, part of that's to do with the compression damping on that Fox fork. It's not a comfortable fork, it's a control fork, but these are very firm, small diameter grips. And you wouldn't believe the influence a really stiff handlebar can have over overall ride as well. So, but luckily, you know, again, those are pretty cost effective adjustments to make. Certainly the grips. And if you went for a carbon bar, you could save a lot of weight out of the package as well, but in a place that it's not going to affect the ride confidence. It's just going to make it even more liftable, agile and playful at the front. But this is such a dynamic bike to ride. Really does not reference its price or the fact that, you know, this is alloy, not carbon. This is just an absolutely awesome little aggro bike in its own right. Was not expecting to be this impressed by this Chisel. I thought, like I said at the start, I thought this was going to be a case of sort of XC bike doing trail bike cosplay. But this is the real deal if you want a rowdy short travel raver. I just absolutely love it when bikes kind of defy my expectations like this. You know, doing this nearly 30 years now, so you'd think I'd have it all covered off. But the beauty of bikes is the combination of elements can create a whole that's very, very different to what you'd think the various components of the bike algebra would create. And that is absolutely the case here. Right, here we go. Yes! I don't think that says it all, really. It's definitely not a comfort bike. You know, fork and rear end are not bothered about making these routes smoother or letting me roll through with impunity. But you hit something like that bank of rocks or a decent sized drop that you need to get absolutely pin sharp accurate. And the way that Specialized to put this skinny little alloy XC bike together genuinely almost defies describing it. You really have to ride one of these to believe it, but also understand that all those positives and takes a serious punishment and being really, really taught above and beyond expectations mean this is not a comfy, cozy, purring pussycat of a bike. Now, this is a proper weapon. And if you handle it wrong, it is gonna hammer you. Because you're probably gonna be going faster than you expect when you have an issue. And it won't have that travel you need to save you. But chasing that edge is such a rewarding experience. I was just going to review this and send it back, but I am horribly tempted to start tweaking it. And also, I think it will be really interesting to get it head to head with the Epic Evo. So I've still got the Pro kicking about. Neil's got it in Sheffield at the moment. So that's £5,000 more expensive bike. But I reckon it'll be a much closer match than you might expect. Right, so I shot the original verdict for this straight after stopping the live ride and was in a very evangelical mood about this bike. And while I still absolutely love it, I think this needs to be more a story of
demonic possession of a relatively pure at heart XC bike, rather than something, preaching that this is the church of love to all comers, because this is a very specific bike. I mean, basically, it rides like a sawn-off shotgun status, specialised, big travel, again, alloy, more affordable, but kind of people's champion slopestyle freeride bike, which, again, a bike I absolutely adore, but based around a tiny shock stop suspension system, rear stays that look like drinking straws, and a really aggressively tuned front fork, monster brake rotor, and super sticky front tyre. And I think the danger is a lot of people are just going to go, well, it's just, it's still a comfy XC bike with just a bit more grunt. But this is a proper flat-out weapon, this is like a 4-cross slalom bike for people who really like to send, but are savvy enough to land it smoothly and aren't just going to obliterate the frame. And historically, that's always been a wonderful niche to ride within. I mean, some of these bikes in this category are like all time, but it definitely comes with some warnings. You are going to have to ride this flat out to really appreciate it. Otherwise, it's just going to be quite uncomfortable, slower rolling than most people are going to need it to be because of that sticky tyre, and just a bit of a handful. So I think for the vast majority of people, I still think the Chisel is the standout bike for just general riding, cross country, the kind of mountain bike equivalent of trail running. I think the Chisel is going to be absolutely spot on. But if you look at mountain biking more like kind of parkour or just full on scrambling, then this is a very specific but potentially fantastically rewarding ride. And it's been a real eye-opener for me. I mean, I've bloody loved it. And I'm tempted to do some even more freaky and tweaky stuff with it. Because I think a mullet back wheel in that could be sensational, because it'll just drop that bottom bracket a bit lower, slack the front out a bit more, and make the back end even more buck wild. So maybe. Well, I don't think it liked that idea, did it? Well, I think, yeah. Yeah, well, do you know what? That kind of sums up the attitude of this bike brilliantly. It's like, oh, just stop whittering on. Just get on and ride. That's what this bike lives for. Just getting out there, sticking a single digit up at everything you think about short travel cross-country frames, and just having an absolute badass blast. So, that's me and Specialized Chisel Evo Comp about done for today. But you might be seeing a lot more on this, because definitely tempted to do some tweaks on this, and I will be doing a head-to-head with the Epic Evo Pro that I've still got, because I think that's going to be a really interesting video. I think this, in some ways, isn't just a cheap carbon copycat, but potentially a carbon killer. And so that's going to be really interesting. Plus, I'll do my usual workshop talk round. But for now, this has genuinely been a wild one. So I hope you've enjoyed it. See you in the comments, because I'm sure a lot of you will have questions. And otherwise, I'll see you on your screens again shortly. Cheers for watching, folks. Oh, and the notification subscription Patreon thing, thumbs up, like, tell your mates, all that jazz as well. Yeah, kind of got sucked into the ride on this one, forgetting I'm even a YouTuber. How did that happen? Because, I'll tell you how. Because bikes like that mean I wasn't prepared to give up having the best job in the world just because all the magazines and websites are falling on my arse. And that whole kind of just grab life by the scruff of the neck and see where it turns out. That's what this bike's all about, which I guess is why it really feels like a piece of me. Yeah, I'm waffling again. Ta-ra.